Many tax professionals I speak to tell me they don't feel confident when it comes to reaching conclusions when doing tax research or looking into a technical point. In this episode, I'm going to share my advice with you to help you improve your confidence in this area. You're listening to episode 129 of the Tax Professionals Podcast, the podcast for UK tax professionals who want to become better at their jobs. I'm your host, Jack Bonehill. I'm an Employment Tax Director, winner of Tolly's Taxation's Rising Star Award in 2023, and I also provide training for tax professionals like you and the firms that you work for. Last November, I was in my home office on a Zoom call with a woman who's worked in tax compliance for about 10 to 15 years, currently working at manager level. And Amy was telling me about how she used to feel when it came to doing tax research and when having to look up tax queries. She said that it always made her feel really overwhelmed, and whenever she was looking into these queries, it would always make her feel stressed and anxious, and she just didn't feel like she was able to do a good job of it. And the conclusion that she'd come to was that she was just too stupid and not cut out to be able to look up the answer to tax queries, which is a real shame. But she decided to take a punt, and she decided to enroll herself on a tax research course to try and get better in this area. And we were speaking about 6 weeks after she'd completed this course. And she was telling me how she's gone from that position there to, in the last few weeks, there was this one particular example where she spotted a potential £2 million issue on one of her clients. And she raised this, she looked into it, and she came up with a solution to the problem. And she proposed this to the technical director in her team. And her manager also provided a solution to the technical director. And she was telling me that the technical director decided to take her solution over her manager's. And as she was telling me this, her face just lit up and she was smiling and she just looked so happy with herself. And she told me that this just felt brilliant. In her words, it felt brilliant. I thought this was so nice for her because she'd clearly struggled with her confidence when it came to tax research and looking up the tax rules. She thought she wasn't capable. She thought that she couldn't do it. And now she's proven to herself that she can do it. And she's been doing it for the next 6 weeks after completing that course. And while she kind of knew that she was still in her early days for how good she could become with this, she'd already had comments from her manager in a positive light. She'd come up with a solution to this £2 million tax problem. And it was just going much better for her. She's not the only person I spoke to in the last year has told me about having confidence issues when it comes to tax research and tax technical. And it's not something that I really fully appreciated until recently, but because so many people have told me about not feeling confident in tax research and wanting to improve their confidence, I thought it would be good to do an episode where I talk about my tips to help you improve your confidence when it comes to tax research. So that's exactly what we're going to go through in this episode. Before we get to the tips, I'm just going to talk a little bit about why I think that so many tax professionals actually lack confidence when it comes to tax research. There's quite a few reasons, and I've listed out what I think are the key ones, but I think the first thing to note is that actually tax is it's complicated and it's difficult. There's areas of tax that are subjective where there's no clear answer, and there are times where there is a clear answer, but a lot of the times you end up somewhere in the middle, somewhere in the grey area, and that makes it more difficult to be sure that you've got the right answer. It makes it difficult also to know whether you might have missed something, which would make it clear. And so there's kind of a lot happening all at once there. I think also it's quite overwhelming for people because tax as a topic is just so vast. And even if you specialise within a particular area of tax, like I do, specialising in employment tax, there's still an awful lot of information and knowledge that exists in relation to just that area of tax. And so when you're going out there to look for information and you're trying to figure out the answer to something, it can be difficult to know where to start and even more difficult to know whether you've missed something or not. And when I speak to people, one of the main things they're worried about is that they might have missed something, like missed the golden nugget that makes this question or the thing they're looking into super clear cut and get them to a nice, easy answer. Also, of course, when you're dealing with tax, there is a real taxpayer on the other side. That could be an individual, it could be a business. But whenever you're looking to these things, the impact of getting it wrong can feel big. And I suppose in a monetary term, it can be big. It could be thousands of pounds, it could be tens of thousands of pounds, £100,000, and in some cases, millions of pounds can be resting on the work that you're doing and the answer that you come to. And the thing is, when it comes to tax research, I don't think people are really taught how to do this. I know that I wasn't taught how to do it. I figured it out for myself from having a lot of practice and experience where I've had the opportunity to do it. And because it's something that I enjoyed, I spent a long time trying to figure out how to do it well. And I've tried and tested quite a few different things. But I think the fact that people aren't taught how to do this, like where to start, how to go through it logically, how to feel comfortable and confident that you haven't missed anything, those things are not taught. And I think that contributes to people not feeling confident too. One of the things that's been quite difficult in thinking about the tips to share here is that you can't really teach confidence. Confidence itself is a feeling. And so what I am going to talk about in this episode are ways that you can help you have that feeling where you do feel confidence. But it's not something that you can teach directly. But hopefully I can help you get there through sharing some tips that will feed into improving your confidence. So my first tip is that you need to start proving to yourself that you actually can do it and that you can come to the right answer. Now, what you can't expect to do is to go from not knowing how to do research well and having very low confidence in doing research all the way to being able to tackle the most difficult research projects when it comes to tax. Because some of those research tasks are very difficult. But what you could do is start researching and looking into the answers on something more simple and more manageable early on. So let's say that you know that there's a tax rule that means that in certain circumstances, there's a particular tax outcome. Let's say it's something that you use a lot on your job. What you could do is you can go look into that to figure out why that is the right answer. Then once you figure it out and you get to that right conclusion, then that should give you some confidence that you can do this and that you can come to the right answer. So I suggest that you start proving to yourself that you can do it, even if it is on more simple cases initially, and then start building yourself up over time by proving to yourself that you can do slightly more difficult ones all the way up to the point where you can show to yourself that you're coming to the right answer, even on the more difficult research tasks. So that's tip number one. Start proving to yourself that you can actually do it by starting on tasks that are more simple and manageable. So tip number two is, I'm probably going to break it down into two separate parts. So the start of tip number two is learn how to do each part of tax research well. Now, what do I mean by this? So being able to go from not knowing the answer, the tax answer for something, all the way to knowing the answer, it's not just like one straight line where you go from not knowing it to knowing it. There's lots of steps that you have to go through along the way to get there. And I broadly break those steps down into, first off, defining the scope, like what is it that you're looking into here? What are you trying to find the answer to? Step two is finding relevant information, whether that's guidance, legislation, or case law, or something else that's credible. Step three then is using that information, so reading it, understanding it, analysing it, and then going into step number four, so actually applying it and making your conclusions. And step five, which isn't directly related to actually finding the answer, but documenting it. And they're the different component parts, in my mind at least anyway, for tax research. And to do well at tax research and to have the confidence that you're doing well, you need to be good at each of those parts, I personally think. So you need to learn how to do those well. That's kind of tip 2A, but tip 2B is so that you can start becoming good at doing each of those component parts. You need to have some level of training, whether that's on the job from a colleague, whether it's shadowing, whether it's a particular training course. I suggest that you get some training to help you be able to do each of those parts well, or at least start learning how to do those parts well. And when you can see that you're doing each of those parts well, it will help you to be more confident. And the fact that you're breaking it down into different parts and maybe potentially working on just one part of that process at a time and showing that you can do good at that part will help you to start building your confidence up bit by bit. So that's tip number two, which is broken down into learn each component part of the research process and learn how to do it well. And the other part to it is to get some level of training to be able to do that well. So tip number three, which you're probably going to think is an obvious one, but Tip number 3 is to just get yourself involved in as much tax research as you can. So sometimes you might be asked to do something specifically by a colleague. For example, can you find the answer to this? Can you go find sort of HMRC guidance that could support this? Can you find me the legislation, please, so that we can have a look at it? Whatever it is, you might be asked by a colleague to do this. But if you don't proactively go looking for places where you can practice your research, then you're going to be missing part of the trick. So you could openly offer your support and offer to help other people that you know are going to have to do some research and look into things. And even on top of that, whenever you do get the opportunity to research, you can go further than you need to for the purposes of completing the task that you have at hand. I know I used to do this one a lot in particular, and I actually got, I suppose, somewhat criticised for doing it by a manager I had at the time because they said I didn't know when to stop. But whenever I had the chance to research anything, I just kept going and going to find out as much about that topic as possible and find out as many different ways to look and find the information. And for me, that helped me to, I suppose, get as much experience and exposure into research as possible. And that definitely helped me with my confidence. And I think if you can get yourself as much exposure as you can, and you can see that you're doing, again, a good job of that, then that can only help improve your confidence. Tip number 4 is, if you're doing a research task and you get stuck, instead of sitting there struggling, I suggest that you go and ask for help. And that can help you with your confidence for a few reasons. The first one is you can go and tell a colleague like what you've done so far and where you've got to and why you're stuck. And they might be able to reassure you that you're on the right track. And that will probably make you feel better and more confident that you're doing the right thing. They can also then give you a bit of guidance and direction, which you can take away and then go and apply in this situation. And it's something that you can internalize and then use in the future if you get into a similar situation where you become stuck again. And so whilst it's a simple thing to do, go and ask for help, I think it can really help with your confidence, particularly if you're getting reassurance that what you're doing is right and you're on the right track. And even if you're not, then you can use that as a learning experience to do better next time. And the next time you do it, that time you should be feeling more confident because you can see that you're doing a good job. Tip number 5 is basically document your research and your reasoning for any conclusions that you make when you're doing that research. Now, someone I spoke to recently told me they made a big change personally when it came to them doing research, and that was for them to essentially keep notes and keep a file of the research that they'd done. So then when they were speaking to colleagues, they could explain what they've done, why, what answer they've reached with justifications, and then talk their colleagues through it and essentially get their agreement to it. When you document your findings yourself anyway, that gives you a chance to basically sense check the work that you've done and see whether you're making sense and whether someone else is probably going to or potentially going to understand what it is that you put down. And then when you actually talk them through it or show them it, they can then give you feedback, which will either be that they agree with you or that they think you should go and check some other areas or whatever it is. But any level of reassurance, again, that what you've done is good and that you've done right things will help you with your confidence. Then that direct feedback to go and do extra things can help you to refine your approach so that the next time you do it, do better. And again, that will also feed into your confidence improving. And last but not least, let's move on to tip number 6. And tip number 6 is to just accept that tax research is hard and it's often slow. I was actually just doing a session yesterday where I was speaking to some people and they were saying that their biggest issue with tax research is that they just feel like they're taking a long time and that they should be getting to the answer quicker. And sometimes you might be able to get to the answer quickly and sometimes you might not be getting to the answer quickly. And also they worry about missing things as a consequence of it taking them a long time and still finding new information and all that type of thing. Now, I think there's a bit of a comparison thing here because you think that you're taking a long time and you think that you're doing it slow and you're thinking that other people would find it easy. You're comparing yourself to other people and you're comparing yourself in a way where you think that you're worse or doing worse than other people. And that's clearly going to make you, that's clearly going to have an impact on your confidence. And if you just accept that it is hard and that it is slow and that even for people with like 10 plus years experience like me, it's not always quick. I think that's quite helpful to realize that because a lot of people do find research difficult and sometimes regardless of the task, it just is going to take you a long time, whoever does it. sometimes it's just never going to be quick and easy to do. So if you just accept that it is hard and that it is slow, I think that will help you to feel more confident, because you won't be looking at others and thinking they find all of this easy. So that's actually all of the tips. And apart from the last tip, they all connect back to one of two things, really, in terms of the way that I see it anyway. And the first thing is improving that skill that you have around doing tax research. And the more you can improve that skill, the more confident you will become. And the second bit is essentially getting reassurance and acknowledgement that what you're doing is right and that you are coming to the right answer. And both of those two things combined are the two main things that will feed into improving your confidence. And in particular, in relation to the skill that you have and how good you are at doing research, that's where something like my Tax Research Masterclass could be really handy for you. That course had been created to teach people how to do tax research well, particularly each of those elements that I talked about earlier, like the scope, the finding the information, the analysing it. That masterclass teaches you how to do all of that and how to do all of that well, along with exercises for you to start practicing what it is that you're learning. The person I told the story about at the start, Amy, that's not her real name, but the story is completely real apart from the fact I've changed her name for obvious reasons. Amy actually came on my Tax Research Masterclass, and it was the 6 weeks after that where she had all the positive experiences that she'd had and that transformation she had around her ability to do tax research and the confidence that she had in herself around doing that. You can find more details about the Tax Research Masterclass by heading on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TRM. That's thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TRM. And TRM just stands for the Tax Research Masterclass. That link is in the show notes for this episode, which can be accessed in your podcast player of choice, like Spotify or Apple Podcasts if you're listening in there, or by heading on over to my website, thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com. Just before we head off this episode, I spoke to Amber recently, who came on the Tax Research Masterclass, and you may be interested in what she has to say about why she joined and what she got out of it. Here's Amber. What prompted you to join the Tax Research Masterclass and to take it?
Aside from what I'd studied during my ACA, I've got no experience working in tax. So I was kind of thrown in at the deep end. So I saw the Tax Research Masterclass on one of Jack's newsletters, and I thought it would be a really great way of like learning how to tackle new taxes, especially how I go about learning a new tax and how I actually apply the guidelines and the advice to my own work. So yeah, that's why I joined.
What would you say you actually got out of the masterclass then?
So the main thing I got out of the masterclass, it really helped me realize how many tax resources are out there and are available to me, and how to use those resources in the most efficient way. So it also really massively helped improve my research process as a whole, like from understanding what's relevant, what might not be so relevant, what I need to be taking notes on, and the importance of establishing a good scope and actually how to analyze and interpret the legislation. Beforehand, I would definitely be, if I got stuck or I was looking into a new tax or something I've not seen before, I'd just do some really broad Google search, really vague question, or maybe look at the HMRC guidance like at a push. That kind of resulted in some really long and drawn out sessions, like ultimately ended up in some confusion and maybe a that will do kind of answer, like this might be somewhat correct. But now, like what I'm actually getting out of it is like how to make the most out of my Corona I subscription and the legislation website and all the other free resources helps me get to the answer a lot quicker. So I know what to look for, or I know where to start at least, but it's also giving me some solid answers, which I kind of wasn't getting before.
What did you like most about the masterclass?
So what I liked most, I really liked your use of examples in like real world situations, or I think you called them stories, but I find that the legislations are like really difficult to interpret or like properly understand, especially because I'm not a tax advisor or a tax specialist myself. So taking the time to explain how you've used the resource yourself really helped me to understand why it's really important and like understand the benefit of that solid tax research process and how I can apply it to my real life situations as well.
Is there anything else you'd like to share about it that we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, so just that I was a little bit worried joining the call that I would be a little bit out of place. As an accountant in industry, rather than a tax specialist or someone who works with tax every single day, I was a little bit worried it would be too difficult or too specialist for me. But I'm really glad I took part. I think that we had a really wide range of individuals who worked across a lot of different taxes in many different capacities on the call. And I never felt like I knew anything less than anyone or I wasn't meant to be there. So I think you've really facilitated a really welcoming environment, no pressure, no judgment. We were all there to learn. And I think we probably managed to learn from each other as well as like the great advice that we got from you as well. So yeah, I don't be scared to join, I would say. Don't be scared if you're not like a tax specialist, even if you just touch tax very occasionally and you want to learn more about how you can improve it. Yeah, just do it.
Would you recommend the masterclass to other tax professionals?
Yes, definitely. I would definitely recommend it, but not just to tax professionals. I'd recommend it to anyone who's got an interest in tax or even works with tax less regularly. I think that the masterclass really focuses on how you can improve your research skills, which I think is a soft skill that it's not really focused on an awful lot. And having that like tax lens applied to that research skill really meant that the masterclass overall was really valuable and it really improves the tax research skills or any research skills, not specifically tax. So yeah, overall would definitely recommend.
So if you are interested in further details about the Tax Research Masterclass, then you can head on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TRM. And that link is in the description of this episode within your podcast player of choice like Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Or you can access it by heading on over to thetaxprofessionalpodcast.com. But that's it for this episode. I hope you found the episode useful and have taken away something to help you to progress, develop, or improve your tax career. Until next time.